Hi guys, I'm PUTSY, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about all the books that I've read in June 2022. So in total, in June, I read 11 books, which is a lot more compared to May. If you watch my May reading wrap-up, I mentioned in that video that I had a huge reading slump. It was my worst reading month so far in 2022. But towards the end of May, I finally find my reading mood again, and by the time June came, I was in a full-on reading mood again, and it's also thanks to all of the books I've read, and consider the fact that I also read a lot of mostly dark, hard-hitting, emotional books in June. I don't know why, instead of pulling me down even further, it actually lifted up my mood somehow. And I read mostly romance books as per usual, but for some reason, more than half of the books I've read have something to do with either serial killer, murder, death, or some kind of tragedy. But I think it's also why I was interested to read more and more, because a lot of them have some sort of mystery involved in it, so I just couldn't put any book down. I kept wanting to read more and more, so maybe that's the reason why I was able to read a lot more books. But yeah, like I said, I read 11 books, mostly romance, but a couple of them are kind of murder mystery and one historical fiction. 7 of them I read from Kindle Unlimited, 2 of them are audiobook, and finally I read 2 paperbacks. If you watch any of my reading wrap-up, so far I haven't been able to get into my physical TBR because I was so obsessed with my Kindle, but finally I'm starting to get back into it again, which I'm super happy about. And in total, more or less, I read 2,152 pages of books, not including the audiobook. So yeah, that's all the stats. Let's just get into the first book. So the first one is actually a 5-book series. Each of them are actually quite short, less than 200 pages. Most of them are around 100 to 150 pages. So you can kind of count them as one very thick book. And it's the Mindfuck series by St. Abby. I mean, I read them through Kindle Unlimited, so technically I read 5 books, but if you want to buy the physical copy, there's one bundle available on Amazon, all 5 books bundled into one very thick book, so you can kind of count this as just one book, but I'm still going to count this as 5 books because I feel better that way. So yeah, the Mindfuck series, there are 5: The Risk, Sidetracked, Scarlet Angels, All Lies, and Paint It All Red. So this is technically a dark romance. It's a romance story between Logan Bennett and Lana Myers, and Lana Myers is actually a serial killer, and Logan Bennett is a profiler for FBI who is currently working on a case and try to catch this serial killer, who turns out is actually Lana Myers. By some chance, they met in a cafe, they instantly made a connection, they fall in love really quickly, and not long after they get together. Lana obviously knows who Logan Bennett is, while Logan have no idea who Lana Meyer actually is. And Lana is quite meticulous when she kills all of these people, and she deliberately left clues to allude to the fact that the serial killer is a huge tall man, very muscular and strong. But Lana, obviously she fell in love very quickly with Logan. Instead of running far away, she risked being caught by Logan and try to be with him. So obviously the stakes are very high, but that's obviously what makes the story quite interesting. It has dual POV, so we get to see Logan and Lana's perspective. We know almost everything about the case, the killing, and everything through Lana's perspective, and then we go back to Logan's perspective, knowing everything that happened while seeing it from his point of view. You know, the fact that he's very much in the dark, not knowing anything. The dual POV really works because it makes me sit at the edge of my seat, seeing the case, how it unfolds, and seeing Logan trying to figure out what happened and trying to find out who the serial killer is. Not only that, it makes me feel very conflicted emotionally and where I stand with this murder case, because through Lana's perspective, not only we get to see who she is as a person, we also learn a lot about her past, what makes her become a serial killer, how she chooses all her victims, and through all of that we'll actually kind of side with her because you understand where she comes from and you kind of want to cheer her on. But when you go back to Logan's perspective, I mean, obviously the best thing to do is never side with the serial killer no matter what, because obviously murder is never okay and you want Logan to find out who the serial killer is and solve the case. But I don't know, with everything that's going on, it keeps pulling you back and forth. So it's very interesting dynamic. I think it's one of the reasons why it's very engaging. To me personally, it's also one of the reasons why it was able to pull me out of my reading slump, because I kept wanting to read more. It's a very, very fast-paced story. The writing style itself, most of the chapters are quite short and a lot of things happen. Like, it's an explosion of crazy things. There's never one dull moment, I feel like, in the books. But because of all the things that happen, this book honestly doesn't feel like a romance with a bit of murder mystery serial killer stuff. It feels more like a murder mystery thriller books with a subplot romance. Not only because the murder things are very, very heavy in the book, but also I don't really care about the romance much because they are very, very insta-love. They've made a connection very quickly, but I don't really feel the connection. So the romance aspect is actually not my favorite part of the book, especially for the first two books in the series. I get a little bit more attached to them as a couple as we goes on to the story, and I don't want them to break. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily because of their relationship. Mostly it's because I don't want Lana to get caught and I want her to be able to finish her plan. Basically, the romance is not the strongest thing about this book, and I will heavily suggest you to check out all the trigger warnings because this book is quite heavy and dark, not only because of all the serial killer stuff. The murder scenes are very, very graphic in my opinion. We see all the murder happening, but not only that, it's also very, very detailed, even to the tiniest detail, like the way the bone crack, the sound, how the victim are pleading for their life, and blah blah blah. Like, everything are very, very, very detailed and graphic. It's not for the faint of heart. But also, besides that, the backstory, Lana's past, and there's also something that happened to the side character, can be very heavy and triggering. There's a very, very traumatic, tragic, and awful things that happened to a couple different characters in this book. So just make sure to check out the trigger warning. But this book for sure made me feel a lot of things all at once. I was very, very angry at one point, excited, sad. There's also one major plot twist, I think, towards the end of the book, which I kind of didn't really see coming, but as it was revealed, I looked back and I was like, wow, it was actually, if you put a lot of attention to the details, you can kind of guess that main plot twist. But yeah, overall, I really like the series. I originally gave it 5 stars, but as I sit with it and think about it compared to my other 5-star reads, it's not really like on top of my favorite list. I don't think it really deserves 5 stars, so I bumped it down a little bit. I gave this whole entire series around 4.5 stars. I really like it. It's still one of my favorite, but it's just not 5 stars tier, you know. But honestly, I cannot really give you a score for each book. I actually cannot tell you the story of each book. I don't remember where they start. I don't remember where they end. I can tell you the very beginning from the first book and the very end of the last book, but everything in between just kind of blurred into one in my mind, so I cannot really tell you. But I think if I have to pick my favorite, for sure the last 3 books are my favorite. I think the first 2, I give them around 4.25 stars. The last 3, 4.5, 4.75. But yeah, overall, I really, really like them, and obviously put me out of my reading slump, which is a great thing. The next book I've read is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This is the first book in the Truly Devious series. Obviously, physical copy. Finally get into my physical TBR again. I've been wanting to read this forever, and I actually started this a couple of months ago, but I was in my Kindle obsession. I could not really part ways with it, so I kept putting it off and putting it off. I managed to get into the first half of the book in like 2 months or something like that, and I finally managed to finish the rest of it this month. It's a young adult murder mystery. It's about our main character Stevie Bell, who get into this very prestigious school up in a mountain, very secluded from the rest of the world, basically called Elle Academy. It's kind of like a boarding school with a very different school system to the rest of the world. They celebrated your individuality and your own skill and hobbies, not really focusing just on like regular subjects in school, but you get into the school because of your talent and your achievements. You know, a lot of young movie makers, someone who already invents something, those kind of people are invited to the school and they get to study for free. And Stevie Bell got into the school because she's interested in all things mystery, so she wants to be a detective. She loves Sherlock Holmes and solving cases and all of that, and she's really interested in a murder case that happened in Ellingham Academy years and years ago, involving the wife and daughter of Mr. Ellingham, and the case is actually unsolved. Nobody knows what happened and nobody knows who did this. All they know is the culprit called themselves as truly devious. So obviously Stevie Bell get into the school trying to solve the case, but also when she was there, another mysterious thing starts to happen. There's another murder, so Stevie is obviously going to try to solve that case as well, in the hope of maybe find some link between the two cases and hopefully solve both cases. This book is actually told in third-person perspective, which is usually not really my favorite because you don't really feel some sort of connection to the character as much as a first-person perspective could. But for some reason, for this story, I don't really mind it, and sometimes I don't even really notice. And we also have two different timelines going on, one from the present time when Stevie Bell is in the school, one from back in the day when all the disappearance, murder, and abduction starts to happen. And it's actually quite fun, to be honest, and I usually really like a young adult murder mystery because somehow there's always some fun, exciting aspect of it that I really enjoy. Maybe because I grew up with Pretty Little Liars, so I always like when a murder mystery sets in high school. Not only we get the murder mystery, we also get the friendship and romance aspects, which I think kind of balance each other out, so I really like that aspect of it. And the mystery in this book is also quite intricate. It feels at times kind of easy and light, but as we get into the book, it gets more and more intricate and exciting, and there's already a couple of twists happen in the book. And I don't know if I have mentioned, but there are 3 books in this Truly Devious series, and it's a continuous series. They are all connected. The story hasn't finished yet in the first book, so obviously I have to read the next 2 to find out what happened. But there are also another book in this series, the 4th one, called The Box in the Woods. I think that one is about a different case, but still with the same group of people. But yeah, in this first book, we still don't know who Truly Devious is. It's a very good introduction to the series in my opinion, very solid. I love the setting, I love the school. At first, it kind of gave me some sort of Hogwarts vibe. I don't know what, maybe because it's a boarding school up in a mountain surrounded by forest. They have their own rules. The teachers were there as well, and I don't know, it kind of have that eerie but also cozy, comforting feeling like Hogwarts have, but obviously they're very different, but it kind of gave me some similar feeling, like a fraction of Hogwarts. And I also really like the characters, which is quite diverse. Every one of them are quite unique. There's also some sort of strong friendship and kind of fun family aspect going on as well, a little bit of romance already, and everything just makes for such a lovable book in my opinion, even though it is a murder mystery. But I think one of the downside, sometimes the story gets a little bit slow and I feel kind of bored here and there in some places, especially the first part of the book. Maybe because it is a 3-part series, so they lay down a lot of the grounds for the characters, the places, the whole surrounding and everything. I give this book around 4.25 stars. It's not my favorite yet, but I do think it's a strong start for the series and I cannot wait to read more. The next 2 is part of another series. I actually read a lot of different series this month. I don't know why, but I did, and this book is from the Finlay Donovan series by Elle Cosimano. I'm so sorry if I pronounce her name wrong, but yeah, the first book is called Finlay Donovan is Killing It, and the second one is Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead. I actually listened to the audiobook for these two and I really like it. It's another murder mystery, but it's actually quite lighthearted, quite funny as well. It reminds me a lot of that series on Netflix, the something that I don't know, like this series right here, which I really like. I thought they have a similar vibe, kind of twisty but fun and funny at times, and there's also a major friendship going on as well. Obviously it's about Finlay Donovan. She just got cheated on, got a divorce recently, kind of struggling to make money and support her two kids, and kind of risk of losing the custody of her kids because she currently doesn't have a stable income. She's a writer, and one day she has to meet with her agent. Actually writes a murder mystery novel, if I'm not mistaken. So she describes the plot in this restaurant and somebody kind of overheard her, and this person actually thought that Finlay is a contract killer and tried to hire her to murder her husband, and everything went very wrong from there. And it's a bunch of crazy coincidences, crazy things happen. There's just a lot of fun involved in this book, and there's a lot of heart involved in it. I love seeing Finlay trying to provide for her kids, basically try to do everything she can to be a good mom. I also love seeing her relationship with Pharaoh. I hate her ex, one of the worst mankind imaginable, so annoying in my opinion, and thinks kind of highly of himself even though he's very much in the wrong. Oh, and by the way, it's first person perspective and it has one point of view from obviously Finlay Donovan's point of view. And yeah, I really like the first book. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. Really like the audiobook as well, and this book wrap up really nicely, but there's one kind of significant twist at the very end which will set up the story for the next book, which is why I couldn't wait, so I immediately get into the second one, Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead. And I have to say, I still really like the second book, but I don't think it's anywhere near the first one. I only gave it 4 stars, which I know still very high, but I'm usually gave book very high scores. I still think it's a fun yet twisted stories, but I don't know, I think a lot of the things that I really love from the first book kind of missing in the second one. They kind of changed the formula. The character that I really like in the first book, I kind of don't like in the second one. Some of them gets a bit annoying. We get to see more of Finlay's ex, but instead of having a redeeming arc, he actually gets even more insufferable in my opinion. Finlay is still as good as she was, as fun as she was, but all the coincidences that made the first book really exciting and funny kind of made the second book a little bit messy in my opinion. It feels a little bit too much. It almost feels like, yeah, this is what happened. Oh no, this is actually what happened. Oh no, this actually, I don't know, it just feels different. All the coincidences didn't work as effective and as charming as in the first book, so I don't know, like they have similar formula but they are treated very differently, which made the two book feels kind of different in my opinion. But I'm still really excited to read the next book. It will be out in a couple of months or something, or maybe early next year. But I have to say, I don't really like the cover for the third book. Very much the same style, but somehow it looks kind of weird. Not as good as the first two. I don't know why. The next book is another physical book that I've been wanting to read for so long. It's been on top of my TBR for a long time, and I'm glad I finally did because it immediately became one of my favorite read of 2022, and it's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo last year. It was one of my favorite read of 2021 and immediately catapult Taylor Jenkins Reid as one of my favorite author of all time. I just love her writing style. She's one of those people who I just think really talented, like no matter what, even if you don't like her books, you cannot deny her talent. It's like when we talk about Taylor Swift, even if you don't like her as a person, if you don't like her style of music, you can never argue that she's not talented. You're crazy if you think she is not talented. It's just a matter of preference and style and taste, and it's the same case with Taylor Jenkins Reid in my opinion. She's just downright talented, especially in the way she writes her characters. They are always very, very uniquely complex, and they are always feels very raw and real. And that's also what I got from Daisy Jones and the Six. This is still part of her old Hollywood cinematic or like story universe, which includes Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six, Malibu Rising, and soon Carrie Soto is back. They are all about the Hollywood world from around the 60s, 70s, 80s, and all of that. But this time, it's obviously about Daisy Jones and the Six. They are a very, very famous, successful rock band in the 70s and 80s. I think early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, they are a rock band. They just released a song. I think they just got into #1 or something like that. But not long after, at their peak of their career, in the middle of their tour, they all of a sudden disbanded, break up, disappear. No one knows what happened, the reason why they break up. And so years and years and years later, someone is trying to make a biography of the band, and this band is finally want to speak up and talk about their experience as part of this Daisy Jones and the Six band during the 80s, and finally give a tell-all of what actually happened and all of that. Which made this very, very unique is because of its writing style. It's kind of written in a interview format. So if you ever watch an autobiography by a rock band during this time, it's pretty much have the same vibe. I love watching biography. You know, with biography, you usually have all the band members and every key people in their career talking about the band, their life, their music, how they started, their key moments, when they are recording, when they are touring, all the drama, the problem that they face, and where they are now, with flashes of B-roll of, you know, their music video and all of that. And this book pretty much feels like a biography. You take out all of the B-rolls and you type in everything that everyone is saying in that biography, and you get this book basically. And it feels very fresh and unique. I wasn't sure how I'm going to like this kind of writing style, but because of, you know, the context, the story, it's about a band which obviously has a lot of people involved in it. I think it works very, very well. It's very effective because obviously when you're in a band with that many people and something obviously went very wrong, people's recollection can be very muddy after all these years, but also can be very different from one person to the other. Obviously, when we're talking about the drama, you'll get what actually happened, perspective of this person, which can be very different from this person's point of view. And in this book, we get a lot of that actually, which is very interesting, and that made the story felt more real to me. Not even halfway through, I felt like Daisy Jones and the Six is actually a real band, and I'm actually reading their real life stories. But because we get to see their reaction to things and their recollection of events, I still get a good grasp of who they are as a person, their characters, their personalities, just by the way they are talking about things and how they see each other and themselves. Like nothing is lost in me. The character still feels very much fleshed out and detailed and complex. And yet again, just like Evelyn Hugo, Taylor Jenkins Reid never shy away from creating a very realistic character who's very much not flawless. Daisy Jones and Billy is obviously in the core of it are good people and have such great qualities. They are great musicians, but they also made so many different mistakes. They made poor decisions, do bad things to themselves, and hurt people who are close to them. And I don't know, sometimes in fiction books, even though they are fictional, some characters are just very, very unrealistic, and they are written very perfectly, like no mistakes and everything, physically, emotionally, mentally. But you never get that from Taylor Jenkins Reid's character, which I really appreciate, because obviously in real life there's no such thing as perfection. Good people can do bad things and make mistakes, and bad people can still be good to other people in their life. And also, going in, I didn't think this book will be emotional. I don't know why, but in my head it's just going to be filled with crazy fun times, but also a little bit hard-hitting. But there are a lot of moments in this book that made me really sad, and I cried a little bit a couple of times. And yet again, just like in Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, there's one huge plot twist in the end, which I didn't see coming. I kind of guessed that this character will make an appearance, but for some reason, it never occurred to me that this character will be that. And it kind of shocked me. It really blew my mind. I was like, I had chills, shivers all over my body. Maybe that's just me, and I really enjoy that. Like, I love that shocking factor. I wish I could listen to every single songs this band ever created, which made me even more excited to see live action for this one. It will be turned into a movie or a TV series. I don't know when they will come out, but I'm super excited for the cast. It has Suki Waterhouse and Sam Claflin in it. I forget who the main character who will be playing Daisy Jones is, but super excited for that as well. Cannot wait for the adaptation. I hope they do all the song justice, and I'm also really excited to listen to the audiobook of this. I don't know if I'm going to do that this year, or maybe I will try to hold off and reread or listen to the audiobook of this next year, but I've heard such incredible things about the audiobook. Every single character in this book have their own voice, so it's kind of technically already made into a movie if you close your eyes and just listen to it. But who knows, maybe I'll do that later this year. But yeah, I gave this book 5 stars for sure. It's not necessarily my top favorite book of the year, but it's for sure one of the best one I've read this year. The last 2 books I've read this month, it's called the Wildflowers series by Micalea Smeltzer. Again, sorry if I butchered her name. I'm very bad with names. But yeah, there's 2 books in this series. It's a duology. The first one is called The Confidence of Wildflowers, and the second one, The Resurrections of Wildflowers. And I read them through Kindle Unlimited. I've heard such mixed things about this book, but every time someone mentioned this, it just always piqued my interest. So I immediately get into this one. They just released the second book of the series a couple months ago, if I'm not mistaken, so it's still like very fresh. A lot of people talking about this, so I read them, and I can totally understand why it has such polarizing opinion, because the 2 books is pretty much feels very different. So the first one, it's a little bit of a taboo romance because it has a huge age gap involved in it between an 18-year-old girl named Salem with a 34 or 32 years old man named Thayer, who is also a single father, just got divorced, and now he just moved into this house and become the next door neighbor of Salem. Salem approached and he was like kind of rude to her, very grumpy. So it's obviously a grumpy sunshine, age gap. It happened in small time, but it also has one of the trope that I usually really hate, which is cheating. So yeah, be wary of that if you hate that trope. Despite that, I actually still really like this book, but make sure to check out the trigger warning. There's a lot mention about griefs and death of loved ones, some tragic thing that happened to Salem, some mention of physical abuse, sexual abuse. It gets very heavy, especially at the end of the first book, which I think what made a lot of people hate the first book. They all say like it's unnecessary, it's too much, very sad and depressing, and like just why? But at the same time, it made the story feels a lot more realistic, because obviously this thing can happen to someone's life. So I don't really mind that it happened, even though it breaks my heart very much. But I don't really like what happened afterwards to both Thayer and Salem, like how they acted afterwards, which leads us to the second book. I don't really like the second book as much as the first one. I gave the first book 5 stars. I think I gave the second book around 4.25. I still really like it, but a lot of the things that happen in the second one feels much like filler. The story should have concluded long before the second half of the book, and the rest of it feels like we're just following along their life, which I feel conflicted about. It's not as exciting as the first book, but I also don't mind it because I like these 2 characters, so I don't mind knowing more about their life. So I don't know, I feel a bit conflicted, but I just adore these 2 people and their love story. I really like them together. I wasn't really sure at first, especially not only because of the huge age gap. It started off as a little bit of cheating. They fell in love really quickly, really deeply, and she's like very young at the time, but at the same time I see why they fell in love with each other. I love all the things that they did together. It's all very lovely. So, but I also think there's such huge growth to their character, and I think they tackle the trauma and healing of both of the main character quite well in this story, which I really appreciate. Even though it is very sad and heavy, there's a lot of moments in it that feels very uplifting and inspirational to me, which I think kind of balance the heavy topics a little bit. Overall, I'm glad to find out that I'm actually leaning towards on the side of people who love the book. And that's it. That's all the books I've read in the month of June. I'm super happy with everything I've read. I enjoy every single one of them. Not one that I was like, ugh, I wish I didn't read that. Every single one pulled me out of my reading slump more, and now I'm in very much a great mood of reading. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel, give my video a thumbs up or whatever you want to do with it. Even if you just watch my video, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it, and I hope I can see you in another video. Bye guys.